You've got big projects to tackle, but your day gets swallowed up by repetitive tasks and constant inquiries. It's hard to make progress when you're stuck putting out fires. That's where Element 451's AI assistants come in. Acting like an extra set of hands, you get your time back for the high-impact projects. Ready to reclaim your time? Visit element451.com/AI team to learn more.
Welcome to the Hired Geek Podcast, where each week we explore the impact of edtech on the student experience with engaging, fun, and relevant conversations that honor the wide range of work happening all across the higher ed ecosystem. I'm your host, Dustin Ramsdell. I've been working in and around higher ed for the past decade, focused on student support and digital experiences. Join me every week for discussions with some of the best minds in education technology. The Hired Geek Podcast is a part of the Enrollify podcast network, a robust collection of shows designed to help higher education professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. Welcome back, everyone, to another wonderful episode of the Hired Geek Podcast. We are here talking about the learning experience for students, but obviously, with a lot of the stuff that I talk about in the show anymore, after all these years, I'm always looking for opportunities to learn and grow myself through these conversations. So our guest, Shawn, and the work that he does with this team at Labster is something that I've sort of heard of, seen of, and kind of excited to explore myself and kind of showcase it and highlight it for our audience here as we're all sort of learning about all the kind of cool, innovative stuff that's happening in sort of virtual reality, augmented reality, all these sort of like different things, kind of trying to follow those threads and just kind of learn what is sort of happening on these sort of frontiers of digital learning, where I think, obviously we're seeing so much that has happened in creating like online modalities for learning. But I think it's whether it's in person or online, there's even more that's happening with some really great digital tools out there like Labster and many others. So we will start as we always do. Shawn, if you want to introduce yourself, give kind of a brief overview of your professional background, maybe give a little teaser for what Labster does, and then we'll get into the rest of our conversation.
Sounds good. Thanks, Dustin. Thanks for having me. I'm excited for the conversation here. I'm the CEO of Labster. I joined in January. I have two daughters that make me incredibly passionate about the world, making it a better place for them and for the next generation. And so it really inspires me to drive my career in places that have really big mission for difference. My career is 20 years in edtech. I love supporting learners and their families and the communities that support them. I've got 10 years at Blackboard during really formative times of the LMS coming of age. Believe it or not, if you can remember, there was a time when online learning was questioned for its efficacy, which is really hard to believe. And it was a space of crossing the chasm. And I was there. It was fun to be on the front lines. And what a joy to be part of that era, to see innovation and educators and technologists come together to support learning. So 10 years at Blackboard, 5 years as the CEO of Vanco, which serves community organizations, higher education, and K-12, making it easier for students to get engaged and parents and families to get engaged. And I came here to Labster this year because of the vision. I joined the board with two visionary co-founders that have just incredible ideas on how we can transform the world. And I'm here to make it scale up and mature. In my undergrad studies, I was in physiology, and I spent some time in the biology and anatomy and physiology and human performance labs. When I got in the lab, light bulbs came off. And so I think the ability to scale practical application with really innovative technology is a great way to captivate learners. So it's a bit of my background and why I'm here.
Yeah, and I guess it's like a clarifying point, because I know it definitely, like you said, being at Blackboard and certainly during a time, during kind of a transition for higher ed, even just in that sort of like pocket of like, okay, delivering courses in a new modality and everything, like any reflections, I guess, of just sort of like, obviously just, there's a lot of sort of existential crises, I feel like, for higher ed happening all at the same time. But like that idea, I guess, of like, you were maybe witnessing people as they were kind of changing or forming new opinions about like, okay, maybe online learning, has a place as part of our strategy. We're going to try to, find our way here. Like just any reflections, I guess, of like how you're kind of navigating those conversations as we kind of think about I feel like we're going through another moment with like AI or, any number of other things that are sort of affecting higher ed of like, it definitely needs to change and people need to change opinions that are like the leaders of these institutions. Like, I'm just curious, I guess, because I think that's like, for me, what we're going through is new in a sense, but like it's just a continual cycle of sort of change and improvement and innovation and everything. So yeah, I'm curious if you have any sort of reflections from that time at Blackboard.
It's so true. In the early days of the LMS, it was about putting a syllabus online and really an administrative workflow. And this is when the confluence of technology and the iPhone at the time was coming to the market. And students just really started acting as consumers of their own educational experience. And so the value of education back then was questioned, and students were asking for a very, very different experience. And then all of a sudden, institutions were thrust into this world where the workforce was laid off, and especially community colleges were seeing an influx of enrollment. And so it was this big question of how do we use technology to handle the moment. And the moment at that time was a lot of demand coming in the door, especially for student services. And how do you meet that demand? Where can technology help scale? And then when you've got all those students in the door, in seat, in class, now how do we engage with them in a personalized way? And really, the only way to do that is to use a mix of different tools, and technology has to be a big one. So at that moment in time in LMS, I think it was really tough for the world, but it really important for education. If you fast forward 10 years to going through the pandemic, of course, the ubiquity of the LMS and online learning and all the collaboration tools, having been in seat already, made all the difference in the world. And I think you're right. We're going through a new transformation. As humans go through adopting new innovation, you've got some of the early adopters, and that's no different in education. They're excited to grab the new shiny object and see what it can do. It's only when you find that you can prove efficacy with what you do, though, that everybody else starts adopting. And I think, that's probably where we are with things like AI. And so it's an exciting time to be in education.
My thinking there is like folks who helped kind of take the baton, their portion maybe of kind of the relay race, and kind of even just knowing like there is light at the end of the tunnel, where I think so many people are like, the sky is falling, the paradigm that I'm so used to, change management is hard. We're going to get to a point where obviously at the core of it, and talking with so many people that do this work, whether it's, on the edtech side or at institutions or whatever else, like they are always trying to have that North Star of like, we want to do right by students, create, more engaging, relevant, experiences, make them as accessible as possible, and all those sort of things. And I think, there's obviously just sort of a confluence of forces that I think drive that forward, where I think like, at a moment where like there was that increased demand in the 2008 recession and kind of after that and everything, like that's when I was like entering into college. And I think it was that notion of like my kind of preconceived notion was like, oh, like I'm sure I could probably get like information online and stuff. It's like, so like there's always going to be like kind of the demand and supply, where it's like, okay, we've built really great LMSs at that time. There's demand from students, and just sort of seeing those forces kind of come together. And I think with what you're doing too, and just the vantage point that you have of like, utilizing digital tools for creating more engaged learning experience. Like, I think it's probably another thing where you're seeing students demanding, like, I know that we can do better with, VR, AR, just needing broadly for higher education to be more relevant, engaging, and modern stuff. So I get kind of talking through, I guess, sort of the struggles, or sort of the questions, the problems that are out there when it comes to creating more relevant, engaging, and modern learning experience. Like, we'll kind of start with like that sort of like the table stakes, and then how we're sort of addressing them after this. So let's start with, I guess, kind of the problems or sort of challenges first.
Yeah, sounds good. Whether it's, the old days of the LMS or the new days of things like AI or AR and VR, as you mentioned, which is one of the big worlds that we're in right now. It's not about the technology for technology's sake. It's really about the problem space that you're trying to work within and wrestle with and solve. And I think right now the work that we do in education is so important because we're facing such existential challenges. So you talk, I think, on your show quite a bit about the shrinking college age population. We also at Labster really look at the workforce, especially the healthcare workforce, and say we're in a crisis overall. And we've chosen to focus on STEM. We think STEM can have the biggest impact, an outsized impact, on solving some of the world's biggest challenges. Hunger and climate and equality, and all of these things really require a fact-based, evidence-based approach. And there's just not enough workers or students coming through the pipeline to be able to make an impact on the world that way. And so that's one of the things we really want to do is tackled the fact that there's less college-age students coming in, 15% less, I believe, coming by 2030. And only a sliver of those are going through the STEM pipeline. And STEM can be a scary experience or field of discipline for students to study, especially if they haven't had a lot of experience or competence with it early on in high school. And so giving them the tools to practice and play in high school, and certainly as they move into their undergraduate studies, makes the field more accessible, and I think puts more people out there in the workforce to solve some of those big global challenges.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite the sort of like formula or sort of like sort of perfect storm of like you've got fewer students, you feel like higher ed is less relevant. The ones who do get in are going to struggle with STEM courses, whether they're in technical fields or not, because I think it is like that's part of the foundation of just a good education is understanding just sort of like why does weather happen or whatever, like just different things like that. Like, you obviously can take a lot of angles to like whatever you might take as your sort of like breadth requirements for science classes or whatever. But like, I think there's that much more of an opportunity now to leverage great tools that build upon like an LMS or something where it's like, okay, you're in your course, in your LMS, like what are we sort of plugging in and kind of channeling through that to make that learning as accessible and engaging as possible and everything. So I guess what are some of those strategies that are kind of helping colleges revamp their coursework and sort of elevate it and address kind of that changing student demand?
Yeah. So as mentioned before, we use immersive technology, and we've got actually two platforms. The first is 3D immersive simulations. And so this is the capability for a faculty to create scenarios and have students walk through and practice and play with concept hands-on in a 3D environment. If I think back to my learning experience going through my undergrad programs, I was looking at diagrams of anatomy and physiology on a page, and now we can dive into those diagrams in a very immersive, three-dimensional way and play and see from multiple dimensions what happens when we move a molecule around or we combine chemicals in the laboratory. And we can do that in a safe place. Physical safety is certainly important, but psychological safety is also really important for students in this regard. And oftentimes what we find that means is students might be, we were talking to one student who struggled to have the confidence to go to her lecture in a biology class. And when she started using Labster, she was able to practice and play in the lab. And it gave her the confidence to understand some of the foundational elements to go talk at a higher level with her lecture about the concepts. And so it makes even human to human conversation much more accessible if you can practice and play in a low risk environment. So I think immersive technology is a really big one.
Yeah. I mean, I think like it's something too that I'm thinking of with this, like one, I think just that idea of safe kind of sandboxes to play in is just great for anything that you're trying to like build and learn and test and practice and everything. So I think that's, I know coming up for me, and unfortunately this hasn't really changed as much as I think it should, the idea of like just high stakes tests, where it's just like, you got one chance to, make sure that you do this right. It's like, maybe I got one practice exam beforehand, but the idea of having really, just way more options and opportunities for people to like, if I need to watch this video about something, like that's become much more of a common way to like kind of, I'm using air quotes here, immerse yourself, where it's like, I could watch this video 500 times, pause it, rewind it, whatever, to really make sure I'm understanding the way that they're explaining this. And then it's like, okay, we're going to do one better. We're going to take that into where like, you're literally like in that reality, like you're in the video, essentially, like you're able to really immerse yourself and, really kind of, I think clarify things in such a more visceral way. And I think one kind of follow-up clarification, because I think this maybe is on other folks' mind as well, it kind of came up as a thought for me, is like, this is something that can serve both on ground and online students, obviously like in maybe a different flavor, but like I'm thinking that there's obviously a lot of institutions who are rethinking campus spaces and making them into computer lab 2.0, where it's not like, oh, I need this computer, it's the only computer on campus that I can go to like use programs. It's like, okay, we're going to take that space and now make it something where people could literally be putting a headset on and really immersing. So there's that opportunity to be sort of engaging on ground students, but then online students, you can obviously like leverage these tools, because like we're assuming everybody's, using their computer almost exclusively to do all their coursework and everything. So can you talk about like that dynamic, I guess, of like how these things, these sort of immersive technologies are showing up for both on ground and online students?
Yeah, a lot there that is just so fascinating to unpack. So first of all, yes, we find that the technology can adapt to the teaching methodology of individual faculty members. So depending on how they want to drive their course, they have the ability to apply the technology in different ways, fully online, hybrid, or fully on the ground courses. So it matches in all of those different flavors. To your point about high stakes tests and assessment, I think that's a really interesting one. And it's, designing coursework for both confidence and competence. And we're really good at competence, but it's the practice and application of that competence that actually makes us show up really well in those high stakes moments. And it could be a high stake moment like a nurse or a nurse practitioner working on their NCLEX exam. And that's a high stakes moment for them. That is their point of entry into the workforce. It could also be a high stakes moment like that same nurse sitting for the first time bedside with a patient and feeling confident and ready with not only the skills, but the soft skills to be able to do patient care. And I think the NurseEat platform that we've got is actually evolved from even the 3D immersive to full VR. So you've got the headset on, you've got an avatar patient in front of you, and there's a nurse educator that has the ability to script and customize that scenario, that interaction that you're having with a patient to meet an unlimited number of cases. So maybe you administer a medicine and there's a side effect to it. And so you have the ability to do branching in these scenarios and see and experiment in a safe way what's going on. I think moving from the high stakes exam like the NCLEX to practical real life, 1/3 of nurses in the first 2 years coming into the field actually drop out of the field. And I think this is a symptom of both the experience in the field, but also how we prepare them. So if we can get them hands-on and they're ready to take these high stakes moments on with confidence, they won't be so surprised when they actually get out in the real world. We noticed that one of the national university students we were talking to, her name is Bailey, went viral on TikTok using our UBSIM platform, training for nurses. And she just got so mesmerized with this COPD scenario and played it over and over again, like you mentioned before. And she got so immersed in it that she said, no, I could serve a patient now with COPD with my eyes closed. And so I think that's the kind of confidence and competence that we're looking for this technology to deliver to the next generation of healthcare or science students.
Hey folks, Dustin here. Element 451 is hosting the AI Engage Summit on October 29th and 30th. This free virtual event features many of your favorite Enrollify creators and will explore AI's impact on student engagement, enrollment marketing, and institutional success. Learn how to tap into the power of AI to turn data into actionable insights, utilize predictive analytics, and monitor and support student performance. Plus, hear directly from current students on how AI is influencing their engagement in campus life. The AI Engage Summit is your guide to understanding and applying AI at your school. Registration is free. Just visit element451.com to save your spot. Now, back to the show. Yeah, and I get it's because I think what I'm thinking of is like, what you're remarking on, where it's like, okay, like, back in the day, you had a textbook. You could certainly also read that 500 times if you wanted to, but like, it feels like much more, static in a sense. And even like the idea of like, okay, well, we made a video that maybe is, talking about the same concepts, and that could be a little bit better in a way because you can add more dynamic kind of visual components, but it still is very like fixed in the sense of like, well, it's a 3-minute video, try to explain X, Y, or Z, but then that idea to like really immerse yourself in is like, well, you're literally like, in this virtual environment delivering, like you said, like medication, and it sort of is like a back and forth. Like that obviously is like kind of the peak of sort of a dynamic thing where it's like, you're not just reading like, well, when you do this happens. And it's like, okay, I could read that 500 times and now I like, that's it. Like, I understand that like, that's how it's supposed to happen, but then like, how is it going to feel when I actually do that with somebody, or, those sort of things that I think the idea of elevating things to kind of that peak level of sort of dynamic, engaging, sort of, and again, I always use the word sort of like visceral, because I play video games and I always like describe certain video games that way, where it's like, when you swing that weapon, it feels really visceral. They really like kind of built it well to feel like this is actually like a heavy axe that I'm even just like using my controller that I'm swinging or whatever. And it's like, that's really a great way to make it a more engaging experience. And I think through doing that, I really appreciate that you were calling out that you are helping students to build their capacity with not just sort of the like functional, like, well, when you give this much of this medicine to somebody, like this is sort of the effect that happens. Also sort of like, that is a human being that you are treating, if you recall, and they are going to be engaging with you and reacting and sort of all that. So like just having that kind of additional flavor where it's not just sort of like words on a page and a diagram and just sort of formulas and, kind of just that the ability for it to be so dynamic adds so many layers of what a student is able to learn. And I think what I'm thinking of is like, I think there's so much discourse now just generally about like, how are we, uh, educating today's learners to be the workers of tomorrow and everything, like, and that, just the idea of how, delineating between like soft skills and hard skills and everything. Like, we're just trying to like, they're all skills, like they're all important. Let's not get into sort of like a whole, back and forth about like what is more or less important. So it's like understanding like the skills that students are getting and really quantifying them, making sure the student understands like, yeah, you can say like, I've been able to build these, soft skills as they were kind of been kind of classically known, in addition to all the kind of technical knowledge and everything. So I think I'll put this to you of just sort of like this kind of work, building up skills across the board in these sort of immersive, engaging learning environments and everything. Like, we talked a little bit about, I think, just sort of like some of the table stakes and everything, but I'll give you kind of the opportunity to like bold, circle, underline, like what makes this work so important, especially right now.
Yeah. So you touched on something which I'll piggyback on, which is capacity issues. And the reason capacity issues are so important is we have such a limited population of people that want to go into the space that we're trying to serve. And so we need to make the barriers to entry very low. We need to be accessible. We need to create a platform that has equality, and we need to make sure that physical capacity constraints aren't in the way of the student getting in. And so that starts at the front door, making sure that we look at where the bottlenecks of the learning experience exist. And physical capacity space, as you mentioned, is a really big one. We want to get hands-on lab equipment or in the room with patients, and you only have so many rooms or patients that you can work with. And so if we can use the virtual world to open that up, we think we can expand enrollments and capacity by 25% through that pipeline. And I think that's a really important thing. I mean, think about like, and then the hands-on component is, I equate this to like a flight simulator as well. So pilots are going to use a flight simulator, and then they're going to get in a cockpit, and it's a mix back and forth with those two. And I think it's recognizing that it's too expensive, and there's not enough planes for them to only do their training in flight. And so I would bold and underline that it's a mix of the hybrid capacity, the ability to do both personalized and experiential learning with a peer or an educator on a time and space of your choosing is one of the things that's going to help make the field of healthcare and STEM way more accessible. So solving the physical capacity space is a big part of it with technology.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very important part to call out is like all of kind of what we said before about just sort of like fewer students and, changing demands. And certainly, yeah, that there's a lot of a need for increasing like nursing workforces. I think a very clear and kind of present danger and example that, yeah, this work is crucial because we don't want to be limited by those physical capacities. And I think that I think with so many other things in life, like we've recognized that, like, hold on, wait a second, like you're saying, it's like, don't we train pilots through like virtual reality things? We've done that for a while. And then it's like, we're starting to see with sort of expanding the idea of apprenticeships where it's like, hold on, wait a minute, haven't we done that for a bunch of different fields for a really long time? Like America is just sort of culturally kind of having a very limited scope of that, like, and other parts of the world have utilized kind of initiatives like that for a lot of other fields. So it's just kind of like funny to me, again, sort of, I guess, to one of our earlier points, that idea of things being kind of cyclical and kind of just where it's like, yep, we're always just going to go through a process of like change management. You got the early adopters and, kind of the middle of the bell curve and the late adopters and stuff too. But yeah, I think it's like that idea that it is so valuable to be creating those kind of learning opportunities and just not being limited by capacity. Like I think it's just, hopefully that is something that is echoing in people's ears as we're wrapping up this conversation here. But this is complicated, complex work, and it's kind of a tall order. We got a lot of institutions, a lot of students, a lot of kind of a lot of work to be done here, I guess, in terms of really kind of elevating learning experiences of students all across the country and all over the world and all that. So what keeps you excited? What keeps you optimistic about like your work and higher ed at this moment? Because I feel like I don't think it would be surprising to anybody if folks are just like, I don't know, I'm kind of like burnt out or this feels overwhelming, whatever. It's like totally understandable. I get it. But I feel like folks like us, obviously, we're trying to make sense of it. We're trying to push forward. So I'd like to hear, I guess, kind of how you sort of like make sense of everything and try to keep yourself motivated, keep yourself optimistic about the work and higher ed.
Yeah, first to me, it's about the students, how students are responding, and I think the generation that's coming in, whether they're adult learners coming to be reskilled or the next generation coming through, they're clear-eyed on what they want to accomplish and the impact they want to have on the world, and that makes me so excited. I've got a 10-year-old daughter and an eighth grade daughter, and both of them play with our tools for their work. My 10-year-old puts the nursing game on. She says, "I want to play the nursing game," and so when I see students engage with technology and get lit up about professions and topics and knowledge, that's what makes me incredibly excited. We've had the benefit of working with 6 million students so far here at Labster, and you can see that every one of those interactions has a large degree of optimism on how they can change the world. And I think right now, higher ed, it's adaptive but not fast enough. We as educators and in this field supporting educators can overcome a lot of those challenges if we keep the student in mind.
Yeah, and I think that's like something that just came to mind is like that your kids obviously are very firsthand exposure to all this kind of stuff. But even like the example that you gave of like, somebody on TikTok is posting content about engaging with something like this. So like, I think it's such a different world in the sense of like back in the day, you probably just had like bring your parent to work day or bring your kid to work and then bring your parent to school day. That was how you maybe got some exposure to about like different jobs and how people like learn to do what they do. But now it's like it's so much more kind of democratic in the sense, or sort of like the idea of like you could be engaging with content on any number of platforms to see like, okay, this is how I'm learning to become a nurse, is using this like virtual immersive technology and all this kind of stuff. And that like that's obviously informing the changing preferences and demands of today's learners like across the board. But then like, yeah, I mean, it would be a way that somebody could be that much more sort of motivated and inspired to be like, oh my gosh, it looks like really incredible. Like I've always thought about like, how could I, become a nurse or like learn these things? Because maybe I felt like just learning things in a textbook didn't really apply to me and everything. So I think it's like, the work that you and others are doing in this space, I think just really just helping to change the paradigms, especially on sort of like the front end of like these students, like you said, being much more clear-eyed about the kind of jobs or careers that they want to do, that they feel like they are going to be well positioned to hopefully be able to achieve those goals, because there's going to be these vastly different kind of learning environments for them and everything. So I mean, it's definitely an exciting time. And I think it is that idea that like something like this, how we're creating kind of learning experiences, is definitely like out of my comfort zone. I've never been like a learning experience designer or anything like that, but it's just like, I can appreciate that this is just like the way that things are going and should go, and just excited about the potential. So I guess as sort of a final thought, like if folks feel like they're a little bit more in my position, do you have any resources or things that you would maybe point folks to kind of keep the learning going, keep the conversation going? If you are, there's folks on your team that maybe you'd want to make sort of accessible or anything, just sort of like, I feel like this is something that's such a rich kind of conversation and a strong kind of trend line moving forward. So if folks are interested, what recommendations would you give to keep the conversation going or keep the learning going?
Perfect, Dustin. Yes, thank you. We've got PhDs, scientists, healthcare professionals on staff. We've got learning designers on staff. They are clamoring for the opportunity to build community, build networks, share ideas, and bring communities of practice out to change the world. So I would invite anybody to find us. Find me on LinkedIn, Shawn Boom, or find us at labster.com. And we'd love to engage in a conversation with a community of practice that's out there, that's passionate, the work that we're doing and the impact for students and for humanity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's one of those things where like, it's going to take a lot of folks working together. This is, again, it's very kind of nuanced and complex and kind of longitudinal work and everything of like building these experiences and continuing to improve them, and trying to like, even like I said, sort of like showcase that these are the learning opportunities that are available to like prospective students, like the idea that this can be part of like how institutions, like if you're going to be kind of jumping on the wagon now, it's like, I think you're still a little bit like on the earlier side. Like you're going to be able to kind of differentiate yourself and be like, this is the way that we are educating our nursing students. So like, come one, come all. Like if you feel like, you're like, oh, maybe nursing school isn't for me, whatever. It's like, well, this is how you're going to learn. So what do you think now? Like that's kind of the things that sort of excite me, because I think so many people do kind of like write off certain, jobs and all that, even as clear-eyed as they might be, because it's like, well, I don't want to learn from a book, or I don't want to do this kind of stuff. So I think it is like there's going to be so many sort of ripple effects from this sort of kind of permeating throughout higher ed. So I appreciate you for, leading that charge, doing the work with you and your team, and for jumping on here to talk all about it. And certainly, please do connect with Shawn, connect with Labster, who has the links in the description for the episode to check out and connect with. But just appreciate this so much because, again, I feel like I learned a lot myself through doing my research and having this conversation. So just really appreciate your time.
Excellent. Really enriching conversation. Dustin, thank you so much for having me and thinking about the work that we're doing and for the work that you do as well.
The Hired Geek Podcast is a part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances you'll like all the other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing constantly, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks all designed to empower you to be a better hired professional. Our shows help you find your next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your host. Learn from people like Jamie Hunt, Seth Odell, Dave Kibbolds, and Eddie Francis, as well as so many other of your favorite leaders in higher education. Enrollify is made possible by the support of Element 451, a leading AI-powered, all-in-one student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.